Good morning. How you guys doing? I hope everyone is staying the course. Staying the course. Being a separated people, not getting wrapped up in this world thought and world character and the ways of particular cultures. Gotta be separated people. Let our faith be displayed. And I hope that, well, for instance, what I want to do, God's will for me is just not made that available. So that's a struggle daily for everyone, is staying in the will of God, not the will of self. Anyhow, this morning, we're going to get back into Amos chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. In the last lesson, we completed a conversation on the judgments that were due upon Damascus. This morning, we'll begin at Amos chapter 1, verse 6, and talk a little bit about the transgressions, the sins of Gaza. And if you're looking at a map, Gaza, well, it's southwest of Israel. Just to give you an idea of where Gaza is in locality to Israel. Southwest down there of Israel. So Amos chapter 1 verse 6. Thus saith the Lord. This is God speaking through the minor prophet Amos. For 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4. I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity, to deliver them up to Edom. Wow, isn't that something? They carried away captive the whole captivity. Now, Gaza was a port city down there along the Mediterranean Sea. It was a Philistine city. The temple of Dagon stood as the capital of the Philistines. And if you can recall in chapter 16 of the book of Judges, where the Philistines, they took Samson, they took him into custody in verse 23. And the Philistines praised, the Philistines rejoiced to their God. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their God, and to rejoice. For they said, Our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. So the temple Dagon was of much significance in historical Old Testament accounts, and it is said that some of the remains of foundational structures of some sort can still be seen there. So God, through the minor prophet Amos, says to Gaza, I will not turn away the punishment thereof. Same promise, same practical consequences that Damascus in the last lesson inherited by the hand of God through man, for 3 transgressions and for 4 more, and for the reason that God saw fit to bring judgment upon Gaza was for the fact that Gaza carried away captive the whole captivity, and they delivered them up to Edom. The judgment here for Gaza, the city of the Philistines, just south and to the west of Israel, was for they took captive an already captive people. And of course they gave them over to Edom. Those Philistines, they took for themselves a certain number of Israelites and sold them into slavery to Edom. Now back then, the Philistine armies, or these bands of Philistine militia members, would go into a compound. They'd help themselves into these smaller communities in Israel and kidnap them, and for profit. And they'd sell them into slavery. In this particular case here, they did business with Edom. And a very similar way to make a day's wages is still it still continues to be open for business in the world today. You may recognize it by child trafficking or human trafficking. These social crimes against humanity that Amos prophesied about has been going on since the fall of mankind, directed by the unregenerate hearts of lawless sons and daughters of the devil, the demonic mind. So the unregenerate men of lawlessness, harboring a demonic mind, would, these outlaws of Philistia would sell a people to other lawless, demonic-minded outlaws. Their business was the slave market. They made a living as members of the union of inhumanity, so to speak. Innocent people, women, pregnant, little children, they were not exempt from this kidnapping, this inhumane taking away of a people out of their environment. No one was exempt. These Philistine militias, they'd uproot whenever and whomever they wished. Hard-working men, attractive women, young children that could be indoctrinated at a young age and be programmed and raised up to be a soldier. No one was exempt. So these people would be kidnapped and sold to dealers, human traffickers. And these innocent people would be sold well far away from their homeland. They'd be in undesired, unknown territories. And in this case of the text here, they were sold off to Edom. The Edomites. Those Edomites, they were enemies of the Jews. So the punishment that God will not turn away of due to Gaza was for carrying away captive a whole entire captivity and delivering them up to, selling the captive people to the human trafficking organization of Edom. And the Philistines, they had opportunity. Even today, mankind, as did the Philistines, had an opportunity to be commandment keepers, abiding by the Mosaic law. But instead, they chose evil. Instead of loving thy neighbor and the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind, and sheltering these captive refugees, they chose to profit in the slave trade market. War crimes. These were crimes against humanity. Verses 7 and 8. This is God speaking through the minor prophet Amos. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And I will cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. And I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish. And here it is authenticated. Saith the Lord. Same language here as in the fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad in the previous lessons, as to the punishment on Damascus. Ashdod and Ashkelon were two Philistine cities. Now, if you look back in biblical history, from back in 1 Samuel, you'll notice that back when the Philistines captured the ark, taking it into the other cities and that city, and each city they took the ark into, each territory, tumors, some translations say hemorrhoids, but afflicted. These tumors afflicted the people in each town it was taken into. And that's just a little note from history. Two of those cities were Ashdod and Ashkelon. So God, through Amos, said he would send a fire on the wall of Gaza, and the palaces would be devoured. And God's going to cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod, and him, the king, that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. And God's going to turn his hand. He's going to take his hand against Ekron, another city, and eradicate the remnant of the Philistines. The Philistia remnant will perish. And they'll be wiped out. It's not a good thing, I tell you. It's not a good thing whatsoever when Yahweh turns his hand, when God turns his hand, the backside of his hand on someone. So imagine standing upright in front of another, and they backhand you in the face. They're going to receive God's backhand, these Philistines. That's the reaction to the action of slave trade, my friends. So this prophecy was fulfilled. This prophecy of Amos. And this verse, this shorter chapter of the 47th chapter of Jeremiah, now it's going to be getting a little ahead of the next lesson dealing with Tyre, but it pertains to today's lesson nonetheless. Jeremiah chapter 47. The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Philistines before Pharaoh Necho smote Gaza. Thus saith the Lord, Behold, waters rise up out of the north, and shall be an overflowing flood, and shall overflow the land and all that is therein, the city and them that dwell therein. Then the men shall cry, and all the inhabitants of the land shall howl. All the noise of the stamping of the hooves of his strong horses, at the rushing of his chariots, and at the rumbling of his wheels. The fathers shall not look back to their children for feebleness of hands, because of the day that cometh to spoil all the Philistines, and to cut off from Tyre and Sidon every helper that remaineth. For the Lord will spoil the Philistines, the remnant of the country of Caphtor. Baldness is come upon Gaza. Ashkelon is cut off with the remnant of their valley. How long wilt thou cut thyself? O thou sword of the Lord, how long will it be ere thou be quiet? Put up thyself into thy scabbard, rest and be still. How can it be quiet, seeing the Lord hath given it a charge against Ashkelon, and against the seashore? There hath he appointed it. And I'll tell you, it's interesting to note that Jeremiah said in verse 4 here in chapter 47, For the Lord will spoil the Philistines, the remnant of the country of Caphtor. In Amos chapter 9 verse 7, God through Amos says, Have I not brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor? In the last lesson in Amos verse 5, if you listened, Amos said, And the people of Syria shall go into captivity unto Kir. So let's read the rest of Amos chapter 9 verse 7 from the top. Have I not brought you up, Israel, out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Kir? We're in just chapter 1 of Amos. And this we just read is in chapter 9 of Amos. I tell you, this is good stuff. Till next time.